David never thought much about November 15th until it became the day that changed everything. It was just another Tuesday, cold enough to see your breath but not quite cold enough for snow. He'd spent the day like he spent most days lately, buried in blueprints at his architecture firm, eating lunch at his desk, and leaving the office when the cleaning crew arrived. 3 years had passed since the divorce, and David had gotten pretty good at the routine of being alone. Wake up, make coffee, go to work, come home, watch something mindless on TV, and go to sleep. Weekends were worse because there was more time to fill, but he managed. His friends had stopped calling after the first year when he'd turned down enough invitations. His sister checked in once a month, but even those conversations had become surface level and brief. At 42, David lived in a house too big for one person. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a yard he paid someone to mow because he couldn't be bothered. The place had been perfect when he and his ex-wife were planning for kids that never came. Now it just echoed, but it was paid for and moving felt like too much work, so he stayed. That Tuesday evening, David stopped at the grocery store on his way home. He wasn't really shopping, just wandering the aisles because going home to an empty house at 6 felt too depressing. He picked up the same things he always did. Frozen dinners for one, a bag of coffee, some bananas that would probably go brown before he ate them. The young cashier smiled at him, the way service workers smile at everyone, and he drove home listening to nothing but the sound of his tires on wet pavement. The community center sat at the corner of his neighborhood, just 2 blocks from his house. David had passed it 1,000 times without really seeing it. They did things there, he knew. Exercise classes for seniors, after-school programs, food drives around the holidays. But he'd never been inside, never volunteered, never participated in any of the neighborhood activities his ex-wife used to drag him to. He almost didn't see her, would have driven right past if his headlights hadn't caught the movement. There was someone on the bench outside the community center, hunched over with their arms wrapped tight around themselves. David's first instinct was to keep driving. Not my problem, he thought. Call the police if you're worried. Let someone else handle it. But something made him slow down. Maybe it was the way the person was sitting. So still they could have been a statue except for the shivering. Maybe it was the memory of his younger sister, back when she'd hit rock bottom and had nowhere to go. Maybe he was just tired of driving past people who needed help and pretending he didn't see them. David pulled over and sat in his car for a minute, engine running, heat blasting. The person on the bench was a young woman he could see now. Mid-20s maybe. She had a backpack next to her, the kind kids take to school, and she was wearing a jacket that looked too thin for the weather. Her hair hung in front of her face and she didn't look up even though his headlights were pointed right at her. This is stupid, David told himself. She probably doesn't want help. She might have a place to stay. She might tell you to mind your own business. But he turned off the engine anyway and got out of the car. Hey, he called out, keeping his distance. Are you okay? The woman's head snapped up and David saw fear flash across her face. She looked ready to run, grabbing her backpack and pulling it close. Her eyes darted between him and the empty street, calculating her options. I'm not trying to scare you, David said quickly, holding up his hands. I just live down the street. I saw you sitting here in the cold and I wanted to make sure you were all right. I'm fine, she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. Just waiting for someone. It was obviously a lie. David had told enough lies himself to recognize one. But he nodded anyway, started to turn back to his car. Then he stopped. Because it was getting colder, and the community center was dark and nobody was coming. Look, he said, turning back. I don't know your situation and you don't have to tell me. But I have a guest house behind my property. It's small, just 1 room with a bathroom, but it's warm and it's empty. You could stay there for a few nights if you need somewhere safe. The woman stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. Why would you do that? I don't know, David admitted. And he really didn't. This wasn't like him at all. I guess because I can. Because it's cold. Because my sister was in a bad spot once and someone helped her out. I don't know you. I know. My name's David, I'm an architect. I've lived in this neighborhood for 8 years. I'm divorced, no kids, no pets. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just offering a warm place to sleep. She studied him for a long moment and David could see her weighing the risks. Trusting a stranger versus spending the night in the cold. Neither option was great, but one was at least warmer. Just for tonight, she finally said. Maybe tomorrow night too, until I figure something out. Sure, David said. Whatever you need. She stood up slower than a 20-something should move, and David realized she was exhausted. Not just sleepy tired, but the kind of tired that comes from carrying too much for too long. She picked up her backpack, which looked nearly empty, and followed him to his car, keeping a careful distance. They drove the 2 blocks to his house in silence. David wanted to ask her name, where she was from, what had happened, but he knew better. He'd want to be left alone if their positions were reversed. When they pulled into his driveway, he saw her take in the house, probably wondering what kind of person lives in a place like this alone. The guest house sat behind the main property, connected by a stone path that wound through what used to be a garden. David unlocked the door and flipped on the light. The place was dusty but clean enough. His ex-wife had used it as a studio before she moved out. There was a bed, a small table, 2 chairs, and a bathroom with a shower. Basic but functional. "There's towels in the closet," David said, staying in the doorway. "The heater works. I'll bring you some food in a few minutes if that's okay. Nothing fancy, just whatever I have. You don't have to do that, I know, but I'm going to anyway." He left her there and walked back to the main house, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. What had he just done? He'd invited a complete stranger onto his property, someone who could rob him or worse. But when he looked back and saw the light on in the guest house, saw the shadow of her moving around inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt useful, like maybe he mattered to someone, even if just for tonight. David heated up 2 of his frozen dinners, put them on real plates, and carried them back to the guest house along with bottles of water and some fruit. He knocked softly, and when she opened the door, he saw that she'd been crying. Her eyes were red, but she was trying to hide it. "Thank you," she said, taking the food. "I'm Lily, by the way. I should have said that before." "Nice to meet you, Lily. I'm David, but I guess I already told you that." He felt awkward, like a teenager on a first date. "If you need anything, I'm in the main house. The door's unlocked if it's an emergency, but otherwise the space is yours." That night, David lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't alone on his property. Someone needed what he had to offer, even if it was just a room and a hot meal. It shouldn't have mattered so much, but somehow it did. He had no idea that the woman in his guest house would change everything. That by offering shelter, he was actually opening a door he'd kept locked since his divorce. Sometimes helping someone else is really about helping yourself. But you don't realize it until much later, when you look back and see how everything connected. David fell asleep that night thinking about the scared woman on the bench, wondering what her story was, and why this felt like the first real thing he'd done in years. The next morning, David woke up earlier than usual. He actually set an alarm, which was something he hadn't done on a Wednesday in months unless he had an early meeting. He made coffee, real coffee from the French press instead of the instant stuff he'd been living on, and then stood in his kitchen wondering what to do next. Should he check on Lily? Would that seem intrusive? Should he pretend she wasn't there? That seemed cold. He settled on making breakfast, more than he could eat, and leaving it on the small table outside the guest house with a note. "Didn't know if you were hungry. Help yourself, David." By the time he left for work, the food was gone and the dishes were stacked neatly by his back door, washed and dried. There was no note back, but the gesture said enough. Work felt different that day. David found himself watching the clock, something he never did. Usually time crawled at the office, but today he kept thinking about getting home. Not because he had anything special to do, but because someone was there, well, near there, in the guest house. It was strange how much difference that made. When he pulled into his driveway that evening, he saw Lily sitting on the small porch of the guest house. She stood up quickly when she saw him, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. "I was just getting some air," she said. "I wasn't trying to, invade your space or anything." "It's fine," David said. "You can sit wherever you want. It's not invading." They stood there awkwardly for a moment. David wanted to ask if she'd found a place to stay, if she had a plan, but it felt too personal. Lily seemed like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. "I got a job today," she finally said. "At the coffee shop on Main Street. It's not much, just part-time, but it's something. I start tomorrow." "That's great," David said, and he meant it. "That was fast. I can pay you rent now." "Well, soon. After my first paycheck." She said it quickly, like she'd been rehearsing. "I know you said I didn't have to, but I want to. I'm not a charity case." David could hear the pride in her voice, the need to not be pitied. He understood that. "Okay," he said simply. "Whatever you think is fair." Over the next few days, they fell into a pattern. David would leave breakfast outside the guest house. Lily would wash the dishes and leave them by his door. They'd wave to each other in passing. Sometimes they'd exchange a few words about the weather, or ask if the other needed anything from the store. It was polite and distant and somehow comforting. But then small things started happening. David came home one day to find his overgrown garden weeded. The bushes along the path were trimmed, and the dead flowers from last season were cleared away. He hadn't asked for that. When he mentioned it to Lily, she shrugged. "I had the day off and I like gardening. Hope that's okay?" Another day, he found a pot of soup on his doorstep with a note. "Made too much. Thought you might want some. Don't feel like you have to eat it." The soup was amazing, full of vegetables and spices and tasting like someone actually cared about the person who would eat it. David couldn't remember the last time he'd had a home-cooked meal. He started buying groceries for two, though he never said so directly. He'd knock on the guest house door and say, "Hey, I bought way too much chicken at the store. You want some before it goes bad?" Or, "The store had a sale on vegetables. I'll never eat all this before it spoils." Lily would accept with a quiet thank you, and later that day or the next, David would find something she'd made with those groceries. A casserole, fresh bread, a pasta dish that was better than anything he could have made himself. 2 weeks turned into 3, then 4. Winter was settling in properly now, and David found himself coming home earlier than he used to. He'd make excuses at work, say he had errands to run or appointments to keep. Really, he just wanted to get back to the house that didn't feel quite so empty anymore. One evening in early December, David's car wouldn't start. Dead battery, probably from the cold. He was standing in his driveway, phone in hand, trying to decide whether to call roadside assistance, when Lily appeared. "Need a jump?" she asked. "You have jumper cables." "In my car. It's parked down the street." "Give me 2 minutes." She came back driving an old sedan that had definitely seen better days. The passenger side door was a different color than the rest of the car, and the bumper was held on with zip ties. But the engine ran, and she knew how to connect the cables properly, which was more than David could say for himself. "Where'd you learn to do that?" he asked as they waited for his battery to charge. "My dad. He was a mechanic before he retired. Taught me all sorts of things about cars." She said it casually, but David caught the past tense, the slight sadness in her voice. "You two not close anymore?" Lily was quiet for a moment. "We had a falling out. About 3 years ago. I made some choices he didn't agree with, and things were said that probably can't be unsaid." David understood that kind of regret. "I haven't talked to my dad in 5 years. Different reasons, but same result." They didn't say much after that, but something had shifted. They'd shared something real, something beyond polite distance. When David's car started, Lily disconnected the cables and loaded them back into her trunk. "Thanks for this," David said. "Really, it's the least I could do. You've let me stay here for a month. A jump start is nothing." That weekend, David did something he hadn't done in years. He invited someone over. Well, technically, Lily was already over. But he knocked on the guest house door and asked if she wanted to help him put up Christmas lights. His ex-wife had always insisted on decorating the house, and he hadn't bothered since she left. But suddenly it seemed sad, having the only dark house on a street full of lights. Lily agreed, and they spent the afternoon untangling strings of lights and trying to figure out which bulbs were burned out. David's ladder was rickety, and at one point Lily had to hold it steady while he reached for the roofline. They ordered pizza because neither of them felt like cooking, and they ate it sitting on his front steps looking at their work. "It looks good," Lily said. "Festive. It looks crooked," David laughed. "But yeah, festive enough. Can I ask you something?" Lily turned to look at him. "Why did you help me, really?" "I've been trying to figure it out for a month and I still don't get it." David thought about it. "You know how sometimes you go through life just going through the motions? Like you're sleepwalking? That's what I'd been doing. And then I saw you on that bench and something just clicked. Like, here's a person who needs help and I can help, so why wouldn't I? Most people would have driven past. I almost did. But I have a sister, Kelly. She went through some really tough times when she was younger. Addiction, bad relationships, homelessness for a while. People helped her when she needed it and she got through it. She's doing great now. But I always wondered if I should have done more. Been there more. I guess helping you felt like a second chance." Lily nodded slowly. "I left a bad situation. Someone who made me feel small and worthless and scared all the time. I didn't have anywhere to go. Didn't want to burden my friends, couldn't face calling my dad after all these years. I thought I could figure it out on my own, but that night was the first time I realized I might not make it. And then you showed up. They sat in silence for a while, watching neighbors walk past with their dogs, watching cars drive slowly down the street looking at lights. It was comfortable, this silence. Not awkward or heavy, just peaceful. I'm glad I stopped, David said finally. Me too, December continued, and the dynamic between them kept evolving. David started eating dinner in the main house with the door unlocked, and sometimes Lily would knock and ask if he wanted company. They'd eat together and watch whatever was on TV, not talking much but not needing to. Other times they'd sit and talk for hours about everything and nothing. Books they'd read, places they'd traveled, dreams they'd had when they were younger. Lily was working toward finishing her teaching degree at night school. She'd had to drop out 3 years ago when things got bad with her ex. But she'd saved all her notebooks and textbooks. She showed David her lesson plans, her ideas for her own classroom someday, and he could see how much it meant to her. In return, David showed her his architectural drawings. Not the boring commercial stuff he did for work, but the personal projects he'd abandoned. A community center design he'd dreamed up, plans for affordable housing that looked like homes instead of boxes. Lily asked questions, pointed out things she liked, suggested ideas he'd never considered. For the first time since his divorce, David felt like someone saw him. Not just the surface stuff, the successful architect with the nice house, but the actual person underneath. And he was starting to see Lily too. Not just as someone he was helping, but as a person who made him want to be better somehow. Christmas was coming, and David realized he was actually looking forward to it instead of dreading it like he had for the past few years. He wasn't alone anymore, not really. And while he knew Lily would eventually move on, find her own place, live her own life, right now this was enough. Having someone to make coffee for, having someone who left soup on his doorstep, having someone who made his too big house feel less empty. He didn't know it yet, but he was already in trouble. The kind of trouble that starts when helping someone becomes caring about them, becomes needing them in your life. But sometimes trouble is exactly what you need to wake up. Winter hit hard in January, the kind of cold that makes your bones ache and your breath freeze in the air. David had always hated winter, the way it made everything feel darker and heavier. But this year was different. This year he had someone to shovel the driveway with, someone to complain about the weather to, someone who made hot chocolate that actually tasted good instead of just dumping powder into lukewarm water. Lily had been living in the guest house for almost 3 months now. She'd insisted on paying rent after her first paycheck, and David had accepted a small amount, knowing she needed the dignity of contributing. The coffee shop had increased her hours, and she was doing well in her night classes. She talked about getting her own apartment in the spring, once she'd saved enough for a deposit and first month's rent. David should have been happy for her. Should have been encouraging her independence. Instead, he felt a knot in his stomach every time she mentioned moving out. They'd gotten comfortable with each other. Too comfortable, maybe. David couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten dinner alone. Most evenings, Lily would knock on his door around 6 and they'd cook together. She'd taught him how to make things that didn't come from a box or a can. He'd discovered he actually enjoyed cooking when someone else was there to share it with. They'd started a routine on Sunday mornings too. Coffee on his back porch if the weather was decent, or in his living room if it was too cold. They'd read the paper together, or sometimes just sit in companionable silence. It reminded David of the early days with his ex-wife before things went wrong. But it was different too. Easier somehow, less pressure. One Saturday in late January, David's sister Kelly called. She wanted to visit the next day, said she had news to share. David almost made an excuse the way he usually did. But something made him agree. Maybe it was time to stop hiding from his own family. I have someone staying in the guest house, David told Lily that evening. My sister's coming tomorrow. I wanted you to know in case you see people around. Do you want me to make myself scarce? Lily asked. I can go to the library or something. No, actually, I was hoping you'd meet her. If that's okay with you. She's been asking what I've been up to, and I'd like to tell her the truth. The next morning, David was nervous in a way he hadn't been in years. He kept straightening things that didn't need straightening, checking the coffee maker 3 times, wondering if his house looked okay. When Kelly arrived, she took one look at him and laughed. You're acting weird. What's going on? Nothing. I'm not acting weird. Come in. Kelly walked through the house looking around like she was cataloging changes. She'd been here a few times since the divorce, but not in the past year. "The place looks better," she said. "More lived in. And are those Christmas lights still up? You never put up lights. I got help this year." Before he could explain, there was a knock on the door. Lily stood there with a tray of muffins, looking uncertain. "Sorry, I didn't know you had company. I'll just leave these and go." "No, stay," David said quickly. "Kelly, this is Lily. She's been staying in the guest house." "Lily, this is my sister Kelly." The two women shook hands, and David could see Kelly's mind working, trying to figure out what was going on. They sat down in the living room, and David told her the story. Finding Lily at the community center, offering the guest house everything that had happened since. Kelly listened without interrupting, but David could see questions building in her eyes. "So you're just helping her out?" Kelly asked. "Out of the goodness of your heart?" "Yes," David said. At the same time, Lily said, "I pay rent, too." Kelly looked between them and smiled. "Right, of course." After Lily excused herself to run errands, Kelly turned to David with a look he recognized from childhood. The look that said she knew something he didn't want to admit. "You like her?" Kelly said. "It wasn't a question. She's a friend. I'm helping her get back on her feet." "David, I've known you for 42 years. I know what you look like when you like someone." David felt his face heat up. "It's not like that. She's going through a hard time. The last thing she needs is me making things complicated. Does she know you feel this way?" "There's nothing to know. I'm just glad I could help." Kelly sighed. "You know what your problem is? You're so afraid of getting hurt again that you won't even admit when something good is happening. I watched you shut down after the divorce. You stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped living, and now I come here and you're putting up Christmas lights and making homemade muffins and actually smiling. And you want to pretend it's just about being a good person? Kelly, it's complicated. Life is complicated. That's not an excuse to avoid it." After Kelly left, David sat in his living room thinking about what she'd said. Was he fooling himself? He'd told himself for months that he was just being kind, just helping someone in need. But if he was honest, really honest, he knew it was more than that. He looked forward to seeing Lily every day. He felt lighter when she was around. The house felt like a home again instead of just a building he slept in. But what if Kelly was wrong? What if he was just lonely and projecting feelings onto someone who was convenient? What if Lily felt grateful and he was mistaking that for something else? Worse, what if he made a move and ruined everything? Left her feeling uncomfortable in the one safe place she'd found. That week, David tried to create some distance. Not much, just enough to clear his head. He stayed late at work a few nights, made excuses about being busy, had dinner alone in his room instead of in the kitchen. It lasted 3 days before Lily knocked on his door. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. "You've been avoiding me." "No, you didn't do anything. I just had a lot of work. David, I'm not stupid. We've been eating dinner together for 2 months and suddenly you're too busy? If you want me to move out, just say so. I'll start looking for a place tomorrow." "I don't want you to move out." The words came out too fast, too intense. David took a breath. "I'm sorry. I've been weird." "It's not you." "Then what is it?" David looked at her standing in his doorway, arms crossed, genuinely concerned, and he almost told her the truth. Almost admitted that he'd caught feelings for her and didn't know what to do about it. But fear stopped him. The same fear that had kept him isolated for 3 years. "Just work stuff," he lied. "But I'm sorry I made you feel unwelcome." That wasn't fair. They went back to normal after that, or as normal as things could be when David was hyper-aware of every interaction. He noticed things he'd tried not to notice before. The way Lily laughed at his terrible jokes. How she'd started leaving little notes with the meals she made. The time she'd fallen asleep on his couch during a movie and he'd covered her with a blanket instead of waking her. February came, and with it, a day that changed everything. David came home from work to find Lily sitting on the steps of the guest house crying. Not quiet tears, but the kind of crying that comes from deep fear. He ran over, heart pounding. "What happened? Are you okay?" Lily held up her phone with shaking hands. Text messages filled the screen. Dozens of them, all from the same number. The words made David's blood run cold. Threats, accusations, promises of what would happen when her ex found her. "He knows where I am," Lily said through tears. "I don't know how, but he knows. He's saying he's coming here, that I can't hide forever." David sat down next to her, his mind racing. "Okay, first we're going to call the police. You're getting a restraining order. Second, I'm changing the locks and getting a security system. Third, you're not alone in this. Whatever happens, we'll deal with it together. David, you don't have to get involved. This is my problem. You're living on my property. That makes it my problem too. And even if you weren't, I'd still help. That's what friends do. They spent the evening at the police station, filing reports and starting the restraining order process. The officer taking their statement was kind but realistic. These take time, she said. And they're only as good as the paper they're written on if someone's determined enough. You'll want to take precautions. David called a security company that night and paid extra for next-day installation. Cameras, motion sensors, new locks on every door. It cost more than he'd planned to spend, but he didn't care. The thought of someone hurting Lily made him feel something he hadn't felt in years. Protective. Fierce. Like he'd fight if he had to. The security system went in the next day. David showed Lily how everything worked, gave her all the codes. The guest house is armed too, he said. And I added panic buttons in every room. If anything happens, you press one and the alarm goes off and the police get called automatically. This is too much. I can't let you spend this kind of money on me. It's done. And honestly, I should have done it years ago. The old locks were terrible. That night, Lily cooked dinner and they ate mostly in silence. The easy comfort they'd found was overshadowed by worry. David kept checking his phone, jumping at every sound outside. Lily was quieter than usual, picking at her food. I'm scared, she finally admitted. Not just of him. I'm scared that I'll have to leave here and I don't want to. This has been the first place I've felt safe in years. The first place that's felt like home. David reached across the table and took her hand without thinking. You don't have to leave. Stay as long as you need. Stay forever if you want. I don't care. Lily looked at their hands, then up at David's face. Something passed between them. Some acknowledgement of what they'd both been avoiding. But neither of them said it out loud. Not yet. That week felt like holding your breath. Every car that drove past made them tense. Every phone notification made Lily flinch. David found himself working from home more, not wanting to leave her alone. The house felt different now. Not threatening, but watchful, like they were waiting for something to happen. And David realized something that probably should have been obvious months ago. He didn't just care about Lily. He was in love with her strength and her kindness and the way she'd quietly made herself essential to his life. She hadn't just needed his help. He'd needed hers. She'd saved him from loneliness, from going through the motions, from sleepwalking through his own life. But telling her that now, when she was scared and vulnerable, felt wrong. Like he'd be taking advantage. So David kept it to himself and focused on keeping her safe, on being the friend she needed. There would be time for the rest later maybe. Or maybe not. Either way, she was worth protecting, worth fighting for. And that was enough for now. March came in like a lion, all wind and cold rain that turned everything gray. But inside David's house, something was shifting. The fear from the threats had settled into a kind of vigilant awareness. No one had shown up. The restraining order had been granted. Life was finding a new normal, though neither David nor Lily could quite relax completely. They'd gotten even closer after the scare, if that was possible. Lily had started spending more time in the main house, saying the guest house felt too isolated. David didn't mind. In fact, he loved it. She'd taken over one corner of his living room with her textbooks and teaching materials. Her coffee mug had a permanent spot next to his in the dish drainer. Her jacket hung by his on the hook near the door. To anyone looking from the outside, they probably looked like a couple. They cooked together, ate together, watched TV together. David had stopped going to his room right after dinner. Instead, they'd sit on the couch and talk until late, or sometimes just exist in the same space. Her grading papers while he worked on personal design projects. But they weren't a couple. They were friends. Very good friends who never discussed the tension that hung in the air between them. Never acknowledged the way their hands would brush when reaching for the same thing. Never mentioned how David's heart sped up every time Lily smiled at him. One evening in mid-March, Lily made an announcement over dinner. I talked to my academic advisor today. If I can finish my student teaching requirement this spring, I can graduate in May. A semester early. That's amazing, David said, and he meant it. But something inside him clenched. Graduation meant moving on. Meant leaving. There's a school district about 40 minutes from here that's hiring for next fall. Elementary school, teaching second grade. It's exactly what I wanted. She was excited, her eyes bright in a way David hadn't seen before. I could actually have my own classroom. My own students. You should apply. You'd be incredible at it. I am applying. I already sent in my resume. They want to interview me next week. She paused, pushing food around her plate. If I get it, I'll need to find an apartment closer to the school. Start fresh somewhere new. There it was. The thing David had been dreading since November. Right, of course. That makes sense. They finished dinner in near silence, and afterward David excused himself to his room, claiming he had work to do. Really, he just needed space to process. Lily was leaving. Not tomorrow, not next week, but soon. She'd have her degree, her job, her own place. She'd move on with her life, and David would go back to being alone in his too-big house. He should have been happy for her. This was the whole point. Help her get back on her feet so she could build a good life. Mission accomplished. But instead, he felt hollow. The next few days were strange. They still spent time together, still had their routines, but something had changed. Or maybe nothing had changed except that they both knew it was ending. David caught himself watching Lily more, memorizing things. The way she hummed while she cooked. How she always tucked her hair behind her left ear when she was concentrating. The sound of her laugh. Lily's interview came and went. She came home looking drained but hopeful. I think it went well, she told David. The principal seemed nice. The school is small, the kind of place where teachers really know their students. It felt right. When will you hear back? They said within a week. If I get it, I'd start in August, which gives me time to finish student teaching and find a place to live. She looked at David carefully. You've been quiet lately. Is everything okay? Fine. Just busy with work. It was the same lie he'd told before, and Lily didn't believe it any more now than she had then. But she let it go. Spring started to arrive, slow and tentative. The trees in David's neglected garden began to bud. Lily had been talking about planting vegetables once the ground thawed. She'd drawn up plans, shown David what could grow where. He'd agreed to everything, not mentioning that she probably wouldn't be here to see the harvest. On a warm Saturday in early April, David's sister Kelly called again. I'm getting married, she said, her voice full of joy. And I want you to be there. June 15th. I know it's short notice, but we didn't want to wait. Kelly, that's wonderful. Congratulations. You can bring someone. A date, I mean. If you want. David knew what she was really asking. I'll be there, and I'll let you know about the +1. After he hung up, David sat with his phone in his hand, thinking. He wanted to ask Lily to come with him, wanted to introduce her to his family properly, not just his sister, but everyone. But asking her to a wedding felt like making a statement, like admitting feelings he'd been trying to ignore. That evening, he did it anyway. They were in the kitchen, Lily making pasta while David chopped vegetables. It felt domestic and comfortable and painfully temporary. My sister's getting married in June, David said, trying to sound casual. She said I could bring someone. I was wondering if you'd want to come. As my date. I mean, as a friend. If you want. You don't have to. Lily stopped stirring the sauce. As your date or as a friend? David's heart was pounding. Whichever you're comfortable with. David. Lily turned to face him. We need to talk about something. This was it. She was going to tell him she'd noticed his feelings and she didn't feel the same way. Or worse, that his feelings made her uncomfortable. David braced himself. I've been living here for 5 months, Lily continued, and somewhere along the way, this stopped feeling like a temporary situation. It started feeling like home. You started feeling like... She trailed off, searching for words. I don't know how to say this without ruining everything. Then just say it. I think I have feelings for you. Real feelings. And I don't know what to do about it because you've been so kind to me. And I don't want you to think I'm confusing gratitude with something else. But I'm pretty sure it's not gratitude. I'm pretty sure I'm falling for you, and I have been for a while. David felt like the floor had shifted under his feet. You have feelings for me? Is that so hard to believe? Yes, no, I don't know. He set down the knife, his hands shaking slightly. I've had feelings for you since January. Maybe before that. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to make you uncomfortable. You were going through so much and I was supposed to be helping you, not complicating things. Lily laughed, but it sounded like relief. So we've both been walking around with feelings for each other and not saying anything? Apparently. They stood there looking at each other, and David felt like he was standing on the edge of something huge. This could go wrong in so many ways. It probably would go wrong. He'd failed at marriage once already. Lily was 20 years younger and still figuring out her life. They came from different places, wanted different things, maybe. There were 100 reasons this was a bad idea, but there was also this. The way she looked at him like he mattered. The way his house felt like a home when she was in it. The way they fit together doing simple things like cooking dinner or working in the same room. The way she made him want to be better, do better, try harder. I don't know what to do with this information, David admitted. Part of me wants to kiss you right now. The other part thinks we should talk about this more. Figure out if it's real or if we're both just lonely and convenient. I'm not lonely, Lily said. Not anymore. And you're definitely not convenient. You're complicated and overthinking, and you keep trying to protect me even when I don't need protecting. But you're also kind and funny, and you see me as a person, not as someone who needs fixing. I don't think I'm confusing anything. I think I know what I feel. And what do you feel? Terrified. Hopeful. Like I might be falling in love with you and I don't know if that's allowed. David crossed the small space between them. Why wouldn't it be allowed? Because you helped me when I had nothing. Because there's a power imbalance. Because people will think I'm taking advantage of you or you're taking advantage of me. Because it might not work out and then I'll lose the best friend I've had in years. Those are all valid concerns, David said. But I think we're both grown adults who can decide what we want. And I want this. I want you. Not because I helped you or because you're convenient or because I'm lonely, but because you make me happy. Because I'm a better version of myself when you're around. Because I fell in love with how you rebuild yourself every day. How you're kind even when life hasn't been kind to you. How you make terrible jokes and leave me notes and remember how I take my coffee. I love how you take your coffee too, Lily said softly. Black with just a tiny bit of sugar. But you always claim you drink it black because you think it sounds more sophisticated. David laughed. Okay, so you do know me. I do. The question is, what do we do about it? We could take it slow. You're moving out anyway, getting your own place. We could date properly, do things the right way. Make sure this is real and not just proximity. I got the job, Lily said suddenly. They called yesterday. I start in August. I was going to tell you tonight. That's wonderful, congratulations. I don't want to move out. You should, not because I want you to, but because you need to know you can stand on your own. We both need to know that this isn't just about feeling safe or not being alone. If we're going to do this, we should do it right. Lily nodded slowly. You're right. I hate that you're right, but you are. So we'll figure this out. You'll get your own apartment. We'll date like normal people. We'll see if this holds up when we're not living in each other's pockets. And the wedding? Come with me as my date. Let's start there and see what happens. That night, they didn't kiss. Didn't do anything except talk until late, working through logistics and feelings and fear. But something had fundamentally changed. The thing they'd been dancing around for months was finally out in the open. They had feelings for each other. Real feelings. And they were going to see where those feelings led, carefully and intentionally. David lay in bed that night feeling lighter than he had in years. Lily was leaving, but not really. She was moving towards something, and maybe they were moving towards something together. It was scary and uncertain, and he might get his heart broken again. But for the first time since his divorce, he was willing to risk it. Because she was worth it. They were worth it. Whatever this thing between them turned out to be. The next 2 months felt like learning to walk on new ground. David and Lily had admitted their feelings, but they'd agreed to take things slowly. Which meant Lily still lived in the guest house, but they were dating now. Actual dating, with intentional time spent together beyond just sharing a property. David took her to dinner at a small Italian place downtown. He picked her up at the guest house like she lived somewhere else entirely. Brought her flowers, opened doors. It felt both silly and important. This ritual of pretending they were starting fresh. Over pasta. They talked about things they'd never discussed before. Her childhood in a small town upstate. His failed marriage and what he'd learned from it. What they wanted from life beyond just surviving. I used to think I wanted the traditional thing, David admitted. Wife, kids, white picket fence. That's what my marriage was supposed to be. But it turned out we wanted different versions of traditional, and neither of us was willing to compromise. What do you want now? Lily asked. Honestly, I don't know anymore. I know I want someone who makes me want to come home at the end of the day. Someone who challenges me to be better. Someone who doesn't need me to be perfect. He looked at her across the table. Someone like you. I want stability, Lily said. That probably sounds boring, but after years of chaos, I just want to know where I'm going to sleep at night and that nobody's going to make me feel small for existing. I want my own classroom and my own place and maybe eventually someone to build a life with. I don't need perfect either. I just need real. They were good at real. That was something David had figured out over the past months. They'd seen each other at their worst, tired and scared and frustrated. They'd had disagreements about small things like whether to watch the news during dinner or what kind of soap to buy. But they'd worked through it all without drama, without games, just honest conversation. May arrived, and with it Lily's graduation. David took the day off work to attend the ceremony. He sat in the crowded auditorium watching her walk across the stage to receive her degree, and he felt pride swell in his chest. She'd done this. Against everything that had tried to stop her, she'd finished what she started. Afterward, they went to dinner with Kelly and Lily's roommate from college who'd driven up for the occasion. It felt significant somehow, mixing their separate lives together. Kelly pulled David aside at one point and hugged him. "You look happy," she said. "Really happy. I haven't seen you like this in years. I am happy. Terrified, but happy. That's how you know it's real." Lily found an apartment in late May. It was small, just a one-bedroom in a complex near her new school, but it had good light and a balcony, and she could afford it on her teaching salary. David helped her move in on a Saturday, loading her still small collection of belongings into his car and then into her new place. "It's not much," Lily said, looking around at the empty space. "It's yours. That's everything." They spent the day making it home. David assembled furniture while Lily unpacked boxes. They hung pictures, arranged the kitchen, set up her small living room. By evening, it looked like someone actually lived there. It looked like Lily's space with her books and her plants and her personality visible in every corner. "Thank you," she said, standing in the middle of her new living room, "for everything. For taking me in when you didn't have to. For believing I could get here. You did this yourself. I just provided a place to stay. You provided a lot more than that." David wanted to stay, wanted to order takeout and christen her new place properly. But they'd agreed on boundaries. She needed space to establish herself, to prove to herself and to him that she could stand alone. So he kissed her goodnight at the door and drove home to his too-big house that felt empty again. But it was a different kind of empty now. Not the hollow loneliness of before, but the temporary absence of someone who would be back. David had Lily's new coffee mug in his cabinet, the one she'd left behind on purpose. He had plans to see her Tuesday for dinner. He had her number saved as a favorite in his phone. June 15th came faster than David expected. Kelly's wedding was at a small venue outside the city, just family and close friends. David picked up Lily from her apartment and they drove together, her hand in his for most of the journey. "Nervous?" she asked. "About what?" "Meeting your whole family as your actual girlfriend instead of as your tenant who they're curious about." David had to laugh. "A little. My parents can be intense. They'll ask a million questions. My uncle will probably say something inappropriate. Fair warning, I can handle intense. I've met you. The wedding was beautiful. Simple and heartfelt, with Kelly looking happier than David had ever seen her. During the ceremony, he found himself holding Lily's hand and thinking about beginnings. How you never know which choices will change your life. How stopping his car that cold November night had led to this moment, sitting next to someone who made him believe in second chances. At the reception, David's mother cornered them almost immediately. "So this is Lily," she said, looking her over in that way mothers do. "David's told us about you." "All good things, I hope," Lily said with an easy smile. "He said you're a teacher." "That's wonderful. We need more good teachers." His mother paused. "And he said you two met under unusual circumstances." "Mom," David warned, "I'm just making conversation." Lily laughed. "It's okay. Yes, we met because I was homeless and your son offered me his guest house. He saved my life, quite literally. And then somewhere along the way, we fell in love. It's unconventional, but it's our story." David's mother studied Lily for a long moment, then smiled. Good. He needed someone who would be honest. His ex-wife was always so worried about appearances. "I like you better already." The evening unfolded easily after that. David introduced Lily to his extended family, and she charmed every one of them. She talked teaching philosophy with his aunt, who was a retired principal. She helped his young cousins when they got bored. She laughed at his uncle's terrible jokes and held her own when his father started asking pointed questions about her plans for the future. During a slow dance later in the evening, Lily rested her head on David's shoulder. Your family is nice. They're nosy and opinionated and overwhelming, so like all families. But they clearly love you, and they're happy you're happy. Are you happy? David asked. Lily lifted her head to look at him. Yeah, I really am. A year ago, I was sitting on a bench in the cold thinking my life was over. Now I have my degree, a job I'm excited about, my own apartment, and a boyfriend who's way too good to me. It's almost scary how much things can change. You're not too good to me, David said. You make me better. There's a difference, yeah. We make each other better. That's kind of the point, right? They danced while David thought about how true that was. Lily had made him better. She'd pulled him out of his self-imposed isolation, reminded him what it felt like to care about someone, given him a reason to engage with life instead of just existing in it, and he'd like to think he'd helped her too. Given her space to heal and grow and become the person she was meant to be. The summer passed in a blur of new routines. Lily spent her days preparing for the upcoming school year, designing her classroom, planning lessons. David worked, but made sure to leave on time, made sure to prioritize dinners with Lily and weekends together. They alternated between her apartment and his house, never staying apart for more than a day or two. It wasn't always perfect. They had their first real argument in July, something stupid about David being overprotective and Lily feeling smothered. They worked through it, learned how to fight fair and communicate better. They had moments of doubt, times when the age difference or their different life experiences felt like obstacles. But they kept choosing each other, kept showing up, kept trying. August arrived, and with it Lily's first day of school. David drove her there that morning even though it was out of his way. He waited in the parking lot until she came back out looking overwhelmed but excited. How was it? He asked. Amazing. Terrifying. Perfect. I have 17 second graders who are all going to learn so much this year. Her eyes were shining. David, this is what I was meant to do. I can feel it. I never doubted it. That fall, they settled into something that felt permanent even though neither of them had said the words yet. David found himself thinking about the future in concrete terms. Not abstract someday dreams, but actual plans, where they might live. What their life could look like. Whether Lily wanted kids because he was starting to think maybe he did after all, if it was with her. One October evening, almost a year after they'd met, David and Lily were cooking dinner together in his kitchen. It had become their favorite place, the room where they'd first started really talking, where they'd admitted their feelings, where they'd built the foundation of whatever this relationship was becoming. I've been thinking, Lily said, stirring sauce on the stove. My lease is up in December. Already? 6-month lease. I didn't want to commit to a year right away. She paused. I was thinking I might not renew it. David's heart skipped. No? Why not? Because I spend most of my time here anyway. Because I'm paying for an apartment I barely sleep in. Because the guest house is still sitting empty and I kind of miss it. You want to move back into the guest house? No, Lily turned to face him. I want to move in here. With you. Properly. Not as your tenant or someone you're helping out, but as your partner. If that's what you want too. David set down the knife he'd been using to chop vegetables. Is that what you want? Really? You're sure? I'm sure. I've spent 6 months proving to myself that I can stand on my own. I can. I have a job, a paycheck, my independence. But I don't want to stand alone. I want to stand with you. I want to plant that vegetable garden we talked about. I want to wake up in the same house as you every morning. I want to build a life together if you'll have me. If I'll have you? Lily, I've been in love with you since winter. I've been waiting for you to be ready, hoping you'd want this too. Then is that a yes? That's absolutely a yes. They didn't rush the rest of dinner. They finished cooking, sat down to eat, talked about logistics and what moving in together would look like. But underneath the practical conversation there was joy, the kind of joy that comes from choosing someone and being chosen back, from taking a chance on love after life has taught you to be careful. Later that night, after the dishes were done and they were sitting on the couch, Lily turned to David. Do you ever think about that night, when you found me on the bench? All the time. I thought my life was over. I thought I'd made so many wrong choices that there was no coming back from it. And then you stopped. You offered help when you didn't have to. You saw me as a person worth saving. You saved yourself, David said. I just provided the space for you to do it. We saved each other. You were sleepwalking through your life and I was running from mine. Somehow we woke each other up. David pulled her close. You know what the crazy thing is? I almost didn't stop that night. I almost drove past you. I was literally arguing with myself about whether to get involved. What made you stop? Honestly, I don't know. Something just felt right about it. Like I was supposed to be there at that exact moment. Like if I didn't stop, I'd regret it forever. I'm glad you stopped. Me too. They sat there in comfortable silence and David thought about how strange life was. How one choice, one moment of compassion could change everything. He'd offered shelter thinking he was helping someone in need. But really, he'd been the one who needed help. Needed someone to remind him what it felt like to care about something beyond work and routine. Needed someone to make his house feel like home again. Lily moved in that December and the house transformed. Her books filled the empty shelves. Her teaching supplies took over the spare room. Her laughter filled the hallways. David's sister visited and said the place finally looked lived in, looked loved. And it was. They built a life together day by ordinary day. They had their struggles, their disagreements, their moments of doubt. But they also had Sunday morning coffee, shared dinners, inside jokes, and the quiet comfort of someone who truly knew you. They had a garden that grew vegetables in the summer and flowers in the spring. They had routines and traditions and a future they were building together. And sometimes on cold November evenings, David would drive past the community center where he'd first seen Lily. He'd remember that scared young woman on the bench. Remember his own loneliness, remember the choice that changed both of their lives. He'd go home to the woman who'd become his partner, his best friend, his love, and he'd be grateful. Grateful he'd stopped. Grateful he'd taken a chance. Grateful he'd learned that sometimes when you offer shelter to someone else, you end up saving your own heart.